Hi everybody, Dion Lyle with Fitnech-5. On this week's Fintech-5, I'm going to talk about the recent spat of acquisitions in fintech. Now, with that said, I'm not a financial advisor. I make no recommendations on what to acquire or how. More, my thesis is that acquisitions are expensive. So, you look at Steve over at FT Partners and the excellent job he and his team do with the FinTech Almanac. Again, I mentioned this in a previous Fintech-5. If you haven't downloaded it yet, download it, print it, dog-ear it, memorize it. It's fantastic. So, global fintech M&A volume. Now, this is not VC investment, which I'll talk about in a moment. This is just M&A. Now, what's interesting here is you see all these names that you remember seeing the headlines for. FIS acquires WorldPay, $43 billion. Fiserv acquires my old friends at First Data, $41 billion, and so on and so forth. Charles Schwab, Ameritrade. These are the really big ones. And if you look at the column on the right, look at how much bigger that column is than the previous years. 2019 was a new record, right? And included 5 of the 6 largest fintech transactions ever. A good day at the office for Steve McLaughlin, to be sure. Now, here's what's interesting. There's a lot of smaller deals you don't read about. And again, FT Partners' excellent almanac points that out. Look at how many deals are down in the sub $100 million, right? 84 deals in 2018, another 68 in 2019. These are deals you don't read about. It's a company buying a technology, maybe even an acqui-hire, smaller teams, more specific innovation. Really interesting thing about that is if you look at the average size, mean, median of the transaction deal, it's quite a bit lower than the headlines would lead you to believe. So the good news is these are all available to the large banks, to the mid-sized banks, right? So my thesis is you can acquire technology before it's a headline grabbing deal size. So let's look at 2020. I already covered Plaid Visa. Got a lot of good comments on it. Thank you, everyone. They acquired them for $5 billion, or as I look at it, 20% of Visa's annual revenue. And you'll understand why that's so important to me in just a moment. But they acquired accounts. They acquired API dev teams, UX, and access to dev customers. Because remember, Plaid uses APIs to connect devs, not the business decision makers, not the CFOs, not the people that Visa usually talks to. So it's a really good new channel to customer connections. That's fine. This one's been covered ad nauseum. Now, let's look at Ally Bank, just bought CardWorks, a really interesting one, right? They bought them for $2.65 billion, or 44% of Ally's annual revenue. Seems like a really steep price, but it really broadens the footprint in the business for Ally Bank in the card arena. A great acquisition. And I'm not going to argue pricing. Did they pay too much? Did they pay too little? What should the ROE be? All that. That's for somebody more financial than me. But what is interesting is they acquire a really steady business. Now, what's interesting is most of us forgot Ally Bank bought TradeKing previously. And as you can see by my crazy little 50s housewife here, oops, they paid $275 million in 2017 to go after millennials. Not a bad idea. Until, as iTape Group wrote, at the finish line in the race to zero. The stocks of Schwab, TD, etc., all dropped dramatically as each of them announced, here's Fidelity zero commission trade, right? Citi recently announced a new robo platform, $50,000 in the bank and you get zero trades. Ameritrade, Charles Schwab acquired. Morgan Stanley ended up buying E-Trade for $13 billion because they see it as a cheap way to get deposits, which is actually kind of smart. So what does that leave? Well, TradeKing and Ally Bank, I don't know what they're going to do. That's going to be a tough business because I don't know that Ally Bank has the wherewithal to stay with a zero trade business. So the whole robo thing shifted just because everyone started the race to zero. So was that a good acquisition or bad? Time will tell. But here's my thesis, and I've said this before and I beat this drum a lot, but VC-funded outsourced R&D for banks. Let's take a look at a chart that I've shown many times and updated. Amazon spends 12% of revenue, or $22 billion a year on R&D. Google, 14%, $16 billion. Microsoft, Apple, Facebook even has $8 billion in R&D. What is Facebook doing with $8 billion in R&D? Spending it wisely, I hope. JP Morgan Chase, they claim and I don't believe this, that they spend 11 billion on tech and half of that is innovation. I don't think so. I think half of the half, maybe 20%, which is better than most banks. So what should banks do? Well, what they should do is outsource to R&D. Access the VC deals earlier, smaller. 32 billion a year in deals in 2018, and that number keeps going up. There's no upfront cost, lower risk, no need to upscale bank employees ASAP. You pick and choose, you cherry pick out of the VC portfolios, and then you invest early and you partner. So invest in fintech innovation early and often. Failure is fine. It's to be expected. You still learn, you still gain. Engaging fintechs is far cheaper than acquiring them later. So that's this week's FinTech 5. Look forward to your comments. Thanks for checking in.